Alright, hello, my name is Michel, and what I'd like to do today is to quickly run through with you the steps of how you can set up your own Google Sheet along with a script that I'll provide for you to automatically or automagically send email reminders on a regular basis. If you're not interested in learning the steps of how you can set up the sheet yourself and you just want to use the template that I've set up, you can click on the link below, which will direct you to another video and a link to that template that you can copy over and walk you through how you can modify the template. So this video is a little bit more in depth on how to set things up yourself. Also, because I wanted this to be as useful to as many people as possible. Some of the things here might be a little basic if you're already familiar with Google Sheets, but hopefully there's something that'll be useful to you and save you a little time in the long run. So basically what we want to do is we need to set up three main things. The first is your Google Sheet, in which you'll have at the very least the date that you want the email sent, the email address of the recipient, their name, and other information that might be pertinent to the email. You're also going to have an email template, and the curly brackets are going to be placeholders for the information that's in the appropriate row of your spreadsheet. So in this case, it would say dear name, which would pull in the appropriate name. This is a reminder of that, and then the information. So to not have to do that manually every time, we're going to use an app script, and that's primarily going to do two things. The first is that it's going to replace the placeholder information with the information from the spreadsheet, but then it's also going to automatically send the email. So when we run the script, it'll be able to send the email to the correct recipient on the correct date. I'll also just mention that I found it useful in the past sometimes that you can take advantage of the cell phone carrier's ability to, when you send an email, it can be received by the cell phone carrier and then send it to the text message. Be received as a text message to your recipient. So this is all great, but what I didn't want to have to do is go in and open the Google Sheet every time and run the script manually by clicking a button. So what we need to do on top of all this is to add a trigger so that at a given day of the week or on a given time that the script will run and then find those that are appropriately labeled and send those emails out for you. So let's go ahead and get started with this. So what we're going to do first is open a new Google Sheet. Oh, I already have one here. We will rename the sheet to whatever is appropriate. For this specific example, when I was figuring this out and tinkering with it, it took me about 3 or 4 days. My goal was to send email reminders to parents that their children had talks that coming Sunday in primary. So it's always more useful to go through an example, and that's what I'll do here, and I'll use that same example as we walk through these steps. Again, it can be adapted to whatever need you might have. So for the script to work, we're going to need a couple, we're going to name a couple of these columns. So the first one, so the first column we're going to label date to send. The next one will be the parent's email. They'll have the child's name, the Sunday date, so the date of the assignment. The next one will be the assignment, the theme for that week, and then this one is more or less optional, but we'll name it email sent. So in order to make it a little more user-friendly as well, what we're going to do is freeze that first row. So we'll go to View, Freeze, one row, and then as you scroll down, the titles of each column will be kept in place. Also, for the script to work, we're going to rename this sheet, and we're going to rename it Schedule. And we're also going to need another sheet, which we're going to rename Template. And the only reason that we're naming these Schedule and Template is to go along with the script that we'll be looking at in a second. So a few quick things that we'll look at here. So the date to send, Typically it was a Sunday assignment, and so we would have it sent out maybe a Wednesday or a Thursday. So since today is Wednesday, we'll just put today's date, August 29th. Oops. (2018). So that's today. And a few things that we'll do to make filling in this information easier. We're going to take advantage of the data validation function and VLOOKUP. And so in order to do that, if you didn't want to take advantage of any of those things, what you could do is just manually come in here and for each one of these, for each one of these, you could manually put in all of the information. So that'll be September 2nd. Talk. So you could easily do that, and the script will work just as well. But what I want to do is be able to save you some time. So what we're going to do first is we'll look at the child's name, and we'll do some validation. Why don't we start with the assignment actually, just so we get the principle down. So what we're going to do over on this template form is in A1, we'll reserve this cell for the template, and we'll get back to that in a second. So we'll just come down here and we'll say the assignments, and we can either have a talk, prayer, or a scripture. And we'll just kind of visually separate that. Okay, so what we then can do is, instead of every time writing in talk, prayer, or scripture, we can select these cells, right click, and then go down here to data validation. Well, you've selected the range on the sheet schedule from E2 to E20, and what we want to do is select from a list in a range. So if we go over here, it's going to say where's the data. We'll come over to template and select these three cells where we've written in talk, prayer, and scripture. Click OK, and we'll leave selected show drop down list in cell, and we'll click save there. Now when we go back, we'll see that this arrow has appeared, or this downward triangle has appeared in each of these cells where we've added the data validation. So now when we click on it, we can select which type of assignment there is. And even though that data validation is there, let's say every week there's a prayer, a scripture, and a talk, and you want to keep those in the same order, you could just copy and paste that there as well and carry that on. So that's the first thing that hopefully will save us some time. The next thing is we'll look at the child's name and the email addresses. So here again we'll put child's name, parent's email. So we'll have a few children, and so if you enter these in once, then you can always refer back to it and use it over again in this sheet, and that's the advantage of not having to type it in every time. So then what we can do is we'll do the same thing. So this time we have the email addresses and the parents' names. So, oops. So we'll put in email addresses for each of the children. And one thing that I'll note as well is that If there's more than one email address, in order for the script to work properly, you just need to separate them with a comma. So here, if we wanted to add another email address, just separating them by a comma is sufficient to be able to have the script work with it. Okay, so once that's in there, what we want to do is, again, do the data validation for the child's name. So we'll do exactly the same thing. You'll select the cells where you want to do the data validation, select the data validation, choose where your data is, this time child's names, click OK, show the drop-down list. So now we can come and select from the children's name, and that's great. We want to add to that, though, is the ability to automatically populate the parent's email address when we choose the child's name. And in order to do that, we're going to actually name. So if you click and select where your email addresses are along with the child's name, we're going to scroll down and click on defined named range, and we'll call this email, and it's on template sheet B10 here to C14. Click on done, and now we're going to come back here and take advantage of the VLOOKUP. So if you type in B2 VLOOKUP, and then it'll walk you through, actually, if you're not familiar with VLOOKUP, what exactly each of the 4 parameters that you need to put in. So for us here, we're going to be looking up, move that away, it's going to be C2, so we want to look up the child's name, and then we're going to be looking, where are we looking for the child's name? It's going to be within this table, which we've named emails conveniently. So if you start typing that in, you'll see that any of the named ranges will automatically come up. So you can just click on that. Then we're going to say, okay, once we find the child's name in that range in emails, what do you want to return? And so it's going to be the value that's in the second column. Let me put in 2. And then the last value that we put is whether the data is sorted, so we're going to put false in there. So if you click on return, we'll see that there it's populated, and we're going to select this cell, and if you're not familiar, you can easily pose all of that formula all the way down in Google Sheets by clicking on the blue box in the bottom right corner and just dragging down. And so you'll see that where there's no value for the name, it says that there's an error, which is fine. When we click on Joey Bob, that email should automatically come up. Josie, John, and Joe. And you'll see that for Joe in the table, that's the one where you'd put a couple emails, and you'll see that those values come up here. Okay. So that should save you quite a bit of time as you set up your template in that way. The next thing that we're going to do as well is something similar for the themes. So Sunday date and then theme. So we'll say in the actual template, I've set it up so it has the actual themes for the week. But here, just to give you an example, we're just going to put some random things in. Okay, so we have our themes. Also, if you're not familiar with Google Sheets or spreadsheets for that matter, instead of having to manually put in each of the dates, a simple thing that we can do is by formula. If you insert the date of the first, then you can say equals the previous cell plus 7, and that'll automatically populate down, and you can click again and drag down so that you don't have to type all those in. One thing that you'll have to note though is that because each of these are linked by formula, if we change this first date to a Monday, then all of these also change to a Monday. So to avoid that, what we can do is copy these cells and then paste special, where we only paste the values. And sometimes what happens is you'll get these 5-digit numbers. And all that is a formatting issue, so that Google Sheet knows how to interpret this, but it doesn't really mean much to us as humans. So what you can do is just select those and reformat the number as a date, and it'll go right back. So if that ever happens, you don't have to worry. You can just reformat it that way. So what we're going to do now is go back to the schedule. Actually, first, why don't we do the same thing we did and name this. The other way that you can either click define named range here, or if this is still open on the right hand side, you can add range. So it's this time from D10 to E14, which is here, and we'll call this theme. So we'll go back to the schedule. For the theme, we'll again use VLOOKUP. And this time we'll say the Sunday date. We'll be looking up in theme. We'll look up in theme. It'll again be the second, and it'll again be false. Oh, I see what happened. VLOOKUP. Okay. So again, we can click and drag this down. And the same thing we can do here. So let's say if we follow this example, we have 3 for every week. We can copy this, propagate it to the other 2, and then we can use a formula again, equals the first one plus 7. And because when you use a formula, it knows it's relating to the number of cells back, we should be able to just click and drag this down, and we'll have a set of 3 for each. But you'll have to remember as well again that if we change this first one to a Monday, you'll see that each of those that depended on that have changed now to the Monday. So we can just do the same thing that we just showed. Paste special values only, and change it to the date. Okay. And you can also do the same thing. So if we're going to keep it to be the Wednesdays, you can either link it between these so that the Sunday date is, we could do equals this date, just like we can do plus, you can do minus 4 days. And that would be there. And then we can just click and drag this down so that again, it'll always be 4 days before the date of the talk, and we can do the same thing. Paste special values only, and this time because we had already formatted these, the dates already stay. So this is everything that you need to set up to have your template ready to go. The last thing though, or for the Google Sheet, the last thing that you need, is your template. So one thing that I'll mention is you can simply type in your text here. So you can say dear, and then we'll have name. One thing that I just want to note is by default, typically in spreadsheets, when you press enter, you go down, tab, you go over. If you want to type it into directly to this cell, what you have to do is, I believe, control return, and then you can go down to the next line. And so on. Oops. Yeah, there we go. So you can format it to look whatever way you want. I was hoping to save a little time, and I just typed this one up. If you also type it up elsewhere and paste it in, it'll save. Oops. It'll save the formatting for you. It should. All right, so just to look at this template, it says, hello, this is a reminder that this Sunday date, which will be pulled in from this here, and then the child's name again from the previous, so it'll pull in the child's name and the appropriate date, has which type of assignment in primary. This week's theme is the theme, thank you, primary presence. So you can format this or personalize this to say whatever you'd like. Now to have it do all the magic, most of the magic, so this is where the hard work comes in. If you take an hour or two to set this up, the magic comes in from the script. So in order to get to that, we're going to Tools, Script Editor. And I won't walk you through, we won't write the script together. I'll just make it available and we'll walk through a few things together. If you're familiar with coding and Google Scripts and so on, you probably know a lot more than I do. This is just how I figured out I could do it, and if there's any suggestions that anybody wants to make to me, I'm more than happy to improve the script for other people to be available or to share that information. So if you're not familiar though, we'll just walk through a few quick things. The double slash, is for commenting the script. So anything that is this color and has these two backslashes will be ignored by the script. So if there's a line that you want to get rid of in the script and you want it to be ignored, you'll see that if you just put two backslashes in front of it, it'll change color, and when you run the script, it will be ignored. So the first thing that we're doing is we're getting, this part just gets where the data is. So on the schedule sheet, it's figuring out where data is, and it's pulling in that data. And then it's also getting the template text variable. It's saying create a variable named template text and get the template in the sheet name template in row 1, column 1. So that's why we put that here in A1. The next thing it does is that it goes through and looks at your data and says, which row does the date today equal the sheet date? So it scans through once it pulls in this data and says, which of these rows is today's date? Okay. And once it finds that row, as long as this last row does not equal to email sent, so as long as email sent isn't written here, then it'll take each of the variables, child name, Sunday date, assignment theme, whatever it is that you want, and then replace it in the email template. So it's going to take template text and replace the curly bracket Sunday date that we had with the Sunday date variable that it just pulled out of row 3 from your spreadsheet, and it replaces all of those. So if you wanted to do this a different way, you can also just concatenate. So I left that here where you would say just write out the text here rather than having a template and using the replace function. You could just say the email text would be equal to within quotation marks, hello, this is a reminder that this Sunday, and then just automatically add row 2, which is the child's name. Oh, I guess it should be reversed here. So this would be this Sunday, row 3, Sunday date, and then the child's name has a assignment. So that's another way of doing it, and it might be easier for some or better. But what I used here is just the replace function, and you can, if you had less placeholders in yours, you can just delete these, or you can add them one after the other. So if there was another one, that you named whatever other variable that you wanted. So there might be where the talk is going to be given, or if it's senior or junior primary. So you would just replace it in that way. So you can modify this and make it work for yourself. And that again is just taking now a variable named email text is we're taking the template text, which is found on the template sheet in A1, and then replacing each of those placeholders by the variable that's found in the sheet in the appropriate row. So what I like to do myself before I run it and send out the emails is just to check, and I left that here so you can use the logger to check your template replacement has worked properly. So here, if you use the logger, and the first time we run this, it'll probably ask for permission. All right, so it's going to ask you to save it. And then if we try to run it now, I think it might. Maybe not. Oh yeah, okay. So it's going to ask you for permission, and basically it's just saying that this script hasn't been verified. Are you sure you want to use it? If you say no, then you won't be able to use it, but it's basically just a failsafe to protect you against malicious scripts that you might have gotten from a third party. So it'll just ask you to log in. It's going to say this app has not been verified. If you click on advance and ignore the fact that that it hasn't been verified by Google, you'll have the option here to go to email reminders, which is your script, and it's reminding you again that it's unsafe. So it's just saying email reminders will have the ability to view and manage your spreadsheet as well as send emails as you. And so we'll allow that. And then once that's done, we should be able to run the script again. And it seems like nothing has happened, but if we go to view logs, what we see is we had in our spreadsheet three rows with today's date, and we see that there's 3 email templates that were generated. So this is a reminder that this Sunday, September 2nd, Joey Bob has a prayer in primary. This week's theme is I'm a child of God. So if we go here, we see Joey Bob has a prayer, Josie has a scripture, and John has a talk. And that's what we see. Josie has a scripture, John has a talk. And so those are sent. Okay, so that seems to work fine. So once you're comfortable with that, what I like to do is test it by sending an email to myself. So the mail app send email basically pulls the email address from the spreadsheet. The subject line can be whatever you want. Up here I've named on line 29 the variable subject primary assignment reminder, and then the email text is what we just tested, the email text reminder there. So if we run this script, might take a little, internet's been a little slow here, but it might take a second. But basically, when I ran that script there, hopefully it will have sent me 3 emails momentarily. But while it's doing that, while we wait for those to show up, another thing that is optional to you in the script is to add the email sent value here. Once the email sent value is inserted here, it just basically prevents sending duplicates. So I've added a line here that says if that row is not equal to email sent, then continue on with the script. So that would just prevent if maybe, like for instance, if we're running this through now and we didn't want it to send multiple times as we do this, then that's what that allows you to do. Oh, I thought I heard it ding. If you then, if you want to as well, something that I've found more useful than that is to have the emails sent to myself. So what you do is activate these 2 lines here where we're going to log what was sent and the email address and the subject line and the text. And then after it's run, I'm going to send that to myself. So you would put your email address here, and I've titled it Read This, Sent Assignments, and then a compilation of what was logged in the logger. Okay, so once that's done, the only thing that's left for you to do is to be able to run this code without you having to intervene, and where the magic comes in. And so what you do is go up to Edit in the script editor, click on all your triggers, and it says no triggers are set up. Click here to add one now. So it's going to run, if you had multiple functions, it would allow you to choose which one you wanted to run, but we only have send assignment. And you can have it, the triggers run a few different ways. You can either run it from a spreadsheet, so every time you open or edit or change, or there's a form submitted for the spreadsheet, but what we want to do is have it time driven, so that every week on the Wednesday between 3 and 4, so that after supper when the parents check their email, it'll come up. We want it to send. So you can set this up however you want. If you wanted it to do a daily timer, you could also do it monthly, the 14th day of the month. But for us, because we have these weekly reminders, we're going to do it week every Wednesday, and then you click save. And so now, again, you can test this out by putting yourself in there and letting it run on the appropriate time. The other thing that I find very useful when I set this up is to add myself in here. And again, you'll have to adapt the ranges that you select for the names and the data validation. But what I like to do is put my own name in there, and whenever I'm almost done filling out this sheet, so that I don't have any more assignments for October 14th, I would put myself in here, and then instead of putting a theme or an assignment, I would just write in here a reminder. So that at the same time that these other parents get their email reminder, I'm reminded that, oh, I need to come back in and fill out the rest of this. Okay. So just to show you here one last thing so that you can see it implemented, the email sent. If we run this now, hopefully it'll run without error. Oh, of course. All right. So the reason that it said invalid email address is because there's no email address here. So if we change that back to myself, because Joey Bob is no longer there, and run it again, this time it runs without errors, and what we see is that email sent was automatically added here, and for whatever reason it's taking a while. Oh, well, now it's being sent on a trigger as well. So but I hope that this was clear enough for you, and that the information, so here it's telling me these assignments were sent, so I have this reminder to myself as well as to those who were emailed that they received those assignments. So that might be helpful as well if there's somebody that might need a little extra help, or just as a reminder for yourself as well. So I really hope that this was useful to you, that something in here can help save you some time. I know it does take a little bit of time to set up. That is why I do have available the template that's already pre-set up. If you do have any questions or any comments on how this could be made better, please feel free to contact me or leave those comments below. And you'll also find below a link to the script that I've used here, as well as some links to some other resources that I used when I was trying to figure this all out. The last thing I wanted to mention is that once you have this all set up, if you're happy with it, that's great. One of the things that I'm working on right now is to develop another template that can be used, kind of a little more plug and play, as well as an add-on that'll be available for a small fee. So if you're interested in that, or getting more information, or again just reaching out to comment, or trying to problem solve any specific problems that you might have, I'd invite you to, there's a link below for a form that you can fill out with your email, and I'll let you know when the add-on is available, as well as anything else that you might want to comment on.